This bulk mockup generator will save you tons of time. This is a Photoshop plugin that allows you to completely automate mockup image creation. If you make custom mockup images as part of your workflow, your process probably looks something like this. You come into Photoshop, you open up your mockup template, you come here, maybe you right-click the smart object, replace contents, find your image, cool. And then you come here, you go File, Export, Quick Export, you go to your folder, you come here, you give it a file name, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of work, it's very tedious, and it's extremely repetitive. Or alternatively, maybe you step into the smart object, maybe you open your next image, take this, we'll copy it here, we'll flatten the image, then we'll save, then we'll come back over, and once again, we'll come here, we'll export, blah, blah, blah. If you only need to create a couple of mockup images, this might not seem like such a big deal, but if your workflow requires working with a lot of different PSD files, maybe you have different rooms, different variants or whatever it might be, or alternatively, maybe you just have a large folder of images that you need to make mockups for, doing this hundreds of times over, it becomes an extremely boring, repetitive, time-consuming chore, and what we're going to do here is show you how to use this automation tool, this Photoshop plugin called Batch Replace Smart Objects, to streamline and completely automate the mockup creation process. Pretty simple to use. This top section here, this is where you set up the automated operations. You can either do it for an individual Photoshop document, one single mockup template, or you can switch it by clicking this arrow here and you can use a folder of PSD files. We'll keep it simple starting out and we'll just do our first operation using one single Photoshop document. We'll come here. We'll find our template that we're going to use. We'll do black frame canvas for this one. Next, you come here, select your input folder to use. This is going to be your folder of artwork images. We're going to select this one here. Select folder just like that. There's an option here to stretch images to fit smart objects. Now this is useful if you know that the images in your input folder are going to vary in size. All of these happen to be the same size and aspect ratio, but if you have a different folder where maybe some of your images are a different aspect ratio and you're not sure everything is going to perfectly fit the smart object, this is a useful, safe default setting. It's recommended you leave this enabled so that when this plugin generates your mockups, it always makes sure that the images perfectly fit the mockup scene and perfectly fit the smart object. So we're going to leave this checked for our first operation. Final thing we do is set up the output folder to use. This is just where you wanted to export your final mockup images to. I have this folder here, final mockup images, and we're good to go. You can specify if you want to do JPEG or PNG for the file type. I'm just going to do JPEG here. You can also control the save quality, the compression level. If you want the highest possible quality, but it'll also give you a higher file size, you can go up here to this higher ends. If you want a really low file size and you're comfortable with the lower quality, then you can go here towards the lower end. We'll just keep it in the middle here, 6 for this first operation. You can just play around with this, figure out what your target file size is, run a couple operations, and you can just kind of find out what works best for your specific requirements. That's really it. You just set up the operation, run this now, click the button. So with this setting enabled, you'll notice that it opens the image and then it closes it. So the reason it does that is because it needs to resize your images so that it fits the smart object, and that's why there's that little extra step where it does that. As you can see, it's just cranking along, creating the mockups completely on autopilot. And we're golden. This operation is completely finished. We'll pop over, take a look. We got 75 mockups. If you just compare this against the boring tedium of doing this manually, I mean, there's no question this thing is a big game changer. So for that particular operation, we had it set up to just use one Photoshop document. What if, on the other hand, you have a workflow that looks something like this? Maybe instead of using one mockup, maybe you have 9 different mockups. Maybe you have different variants, like different frame colors for your artwork, and also maybe you have some room mockups so that people can sort of see a preview of what does the artwork look like in different environments. What happens then, and how can we use the plugin to generate mockups under those conditions? Excellent question. So to do that, you're going to want to switch over to this mode. There's really 2 ways to do it, actually. If you want, you can set up and save individual operations. You can chain together steps if you want, and you can do it that way. The simpler way, in my opinion, is just use the folder of PSD files, because all you need to do is come here, select your folder of PSD files. That's good. And whatever mockups are in this particular folder, whatever PSD files or registers, it'll just iterate through each one of those. So it'll start with this one. For all of the artwork images inside of this folder, it'll create all of the mockups, export them, then it'll move on to the second one, it'll move on to this one, using all the artwork images. Once again, it'll create the mockups, it'll export them, and so forth. Rinse and repeat. It'll just chain through, iterate through all the PSD files that you have in the folder. So that's our folder. We're going to select our input folder once again, artwork images 1, come here, select folder. I'm going to uncheck this particular option for this operation, just because I happen to know that all of these images are already sized to fit perfectly, and it does run a little faster if this is unchecked. Output folder to use, that's our last step here. Final mockup images 1, we'll use this folder here, and we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and click run this now. So it starts with the first one. This is just a plain canvas mockup here, and it is just flying right now. We're up to 30, we're up to 40, we're up to 50. This thing is just cranking these mockups out. Finished with the first one, it closes that file, and then it opens up the next one. Now, that's a cool feature because the thing with Photoshop is a lot of PSD files, they tend to be on the larger size, especially mockup files. You know, sometimes they're really sweaty files with a lot of layers, and it's a really complex layer stack. And so, if you're just opening up, 1, 2, 3, 20, 30 different PSD files, it could really just, cause your Photoshop to slow down and just clog up the RAM, and it could even crash the Photoshop. So, the cool thing about this plugin is, if you're using an entire folder of files, what it does is it'll open one, it'll complete the operation, and it'll close it. So it allows you to sort of preserve those CPU resources, keeps Photoshop in a low memory state, and it allows you to just keep cranking, keep pumping out the mockups completely on autopilot. And this operation is completely finished. Let's pop over here, take a look. 675 mockup images created. That is a lot of mockup images. And the cool thing about the way that it does the file naming is it sort of groups them based on artwork name. So, if you have a step in the workflow, you got to upload these to your store or whatever. Cool, you can grab those and do it. Come to this next one, abstract art number 2. Cool, we're on to number 3. You can just sort of grab and go just like that instead of needing to, find the files, all that stuff. So that's a pretty handy feature as well. As you can see, 675 mockups. If I did this manually, it would probably take me an entire day, I think. Coming in, opening the smart objects, dropping the images, making sure they fit nicely, making sure the file names are all correct. I mean, 675 images, that would probably take me the entire day to do. And this plugin just cranked it out in just a couple of minutes. So it makes it really easy. You just come in, you click a few things, you click run, and it just automates this entire process for you. A few other cool things I want to show you is the ability to save individual operations, or you can even save operations with multiple steps so that you can just truly automate your entire workflow with one button click. So we'll start with saving one operation. Let's just say you just have one particular mockup that you always do. Maybe your workflow is simple and you just always use this one mockup file, whatever it is. And you also know, hey, anytime I'm done with my operation, I always put my artwork images in folder number 2. And I always export my mockups to this one here. Cool. And I always got to make sure, hey, this is the setting, I played around with it, this is what's optimal for my particular workflow. Sweet. Instead of running in real time, you can just come here, give it a name, black framed canvas, mockup, click save, it'll say saved, and then you can pop over here. Then what this allows you to do, instead of coming in and you gotta click and you gotta find the file paths, cool, if your workflow is standardized, and if everything is always in the same spot, you can just come here, click run, and it'll just automate this process for you. Now, one thing you'll notice towards the end of that operation, I deliberately included a couple of missized images just to sort of showcase the fact that it can resize the images. So this is what those last 3 images looked like. As you can see, they're squashed. So even if, you have different sized images in here, there's variance in terms of the aspect ratio or whatever, cool, no problem. It'll stretch the images so that it perfectly fits the mockup scene. Something else you can do, instead of saving individual piecemeal operations, you can instead set up workflows that have multiple steps, and it'll basically just chain together operations and just run one after the other until completion. First thing you want to do is click create new workflow, give it a name. We'll just say canvas arts mockups, click save, and then you just set up each step here. So we'll come here, we'll just start with the black framed canvas. We're going to use the same input folder for all of them, and we'll do the same output folder for all of them. Uncheck this, and then cool, you can just come here, you can say black framed canvas if you want to do it this way. Then we'll say cool, I want to use the brown framed canvas next. So basically, whenever you click add, it saves whatever parameters you have set up top here. So you basically set it up here, come down here, give it a name, and then add the step. So we'll do one more, white framed canvas, come down here, white framed canvas, add. And you can do it this way. You can run it from here if you want to, or you can pop over here. And what this allows you to do, step 1, black framed canvas. Step 2, brown framed canvas. Step 3, white framed canvas. So all you got to do is click the one button, and it'll just go through. Step 1, use that mockup file, make all the mockups. Cool. Step 2, use that mockup file, create all the mockups. And so forth for however many steps you have. We'll go ahead and click run to show you how this works. It's using this black one, which was already opened. Now it's moving on to the brown one. And finally, it's moving on to the white one. And there we go. This operation is completely finished. Now you're probably wondering, why is this last mockup so fucked up? That's because, if you recall, we had these ones sized incorrectly on purpose, and I did not have this checkbox enabled for this particular operation. And that's why it's generally recommended that you keep this enabled, because if it doesn't perfectly fit the mockup, this is what you can end up having. But anyway, we'll pop over here. You can see it created the black one, the brown one, the white one for all the images, and it just cranked them out on autopilot. Now, something else that's really cool is you can actually set up multiple step operations that don't just use an individual Photoshop document like we did here, but instead what you can do is set up a multiple step operation that uses an entire folder of PSD files. So let's imagine you're a graphic designer. Maybe you have a few different clients and you create mockup images for all of them. What this feature allows you to do is you could come here and you could say make all clients mockups, save. And then what you can do for step 1, you could say client number 1 mockups. We'll come here, we'll select this folder. What I did here, I created a separate folder here where it's PSD files for client 1, artwork images for client 1, final images for client 1. And so we'll set up the client 1 stuff. Here's the folder of PSD mockups. So client 1, he has his set of mockups. Client 2, he has different mockups. And similarly, client 1, he likes the astronomy artwork. Client number 2, he's all about the classy animal portraits. So we got the mockup folder selected. We'll go ahead and select the input folder to use for client 1. And we'll select the output folder for client number 1. We'll say JPEG. We'll go ahead and add. So that'll just create all of the client 1 mockups. Then we just come up here. Client number 2 uses a different folder. He uses different artwork, and we're going to export them to a different final folder. And just for the hell of it, we'll say PNG, ultra high quality. Sure. And then we just come here, client number 2 mockups, add. And so what this allows you to do, and here it uses an entire folder of PSD files. So we're going to run this real quick. So quite literally using this Photoshop plugin, assuming that you have a standardized workflow where client 1's folders are always in the same spot, client 2's assets, they're always in the same spot, quite literally using this plugin, you can just come here, click one single button, and it'll just create all the mockup images entirely on autopilot for you. Anyway, hope you found this helpful. Make sure to drop a like and comment for that YouTube algorithmic engagement action that our overlords on YouTube love. Thanks again for watching, and see you later.